let's do part two. In part one of this series, we talked about you want to be a vendor. You know you have a product that you want to take to a market, and we talked about getting signed up. In part two, we're going to talk about things to consider going right up into that market and right up into opening time, all the things that we want to think about. I'll do my best not to ramble, but there's no guarantees. Also, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment below. Let's jump right into it. So here in part two, we're talking about we signed up for a market, we know what we're doing. Now we know where we're doing it. We don't know what exactly we're doing yet. What do we need to think about here in terms of how to be successful? So first off, we need to consider, just before we even think about the market itself, we need to think about our display, and we need to think about tearing it down, setting it up, transporting it both ways. That's a lot to deal with. I would not try and master that your first time out. I would not try and make that a perfect situation your first time out. I would do the best you can with the funds and time you have available. But I would not go into it thinking, whatever I do this first time is going to be what I do forever. I can't tell you how many times I've changed my booth setup over the years. I have a pretty normal setup that I do once I find what my new layout needs to be, I keep it pretty standard. But I'm telling you guys, you need to consider, if I'm taking tables, how am I going to display things on those tables? If I'm taking shelving, am I going to have it already assembled, or is it going to be put together, tear down? So things like that you really want to consider. Now, things like the tables, table covers, anything that you'd use for staging, whether it's crates, shelves, boxes, things like that. If you don't have it on hand for this first market, maybe ask a friend or family member if you can borrow. If you don't have that option and you do need to purchase things for staging options, go down to a thrift store, go down to Goodwill, go down to one of these places that you can maybe get some stuff that maybe hasn't seen its glory days are behind it, but it's still functional, just to get you through. You don't want to invest more right now than you absolutely have to, because again, you're probably going to change your setup multiple times over the course of this marathon, and you just want to get to the event, right? I mentioned it. Transportation. In terms of your items specifically, you need to have some form of being able to move them. Don't assume that you're going to be set up right next to where your vehicle is. Assume you're going to have to do a little bit carrying and walking. So again, maybe you need to get a dolly or like a cart or something from a friend or family member if you don't have it, so that can help you. But just kind of keep that in mind. If you sell plants, for example, make sure you have something that you can use to carry it, whether it's a large boxed, shallow box lid, something like that, trays, things like that. For my art that I sell, for my canvas paintings, I use a tote that fits them all. My wife uses smaller plastic containers to store her jewelry in it. The more organized you are starting out, the better it's going to be. And the more organized you are leaving your home to the event, the more likely you are to be organized coming back home from the event. Now, because we don't know specifically what items you're selling in this scenario, staging is kind of hard to get into specifics. So I do encourage, if you have a question or anything you want to comment on when it comes to staging, leave a comment below and I'll definitely try to respond to it. But here's some other things that we need to consider for that first event. You need to have some petty cash. How much cash you're going to carry, that's on you. I would recommend a fanny pack or some kind of shoulder bag, so that if you're up and moving, you have your ability to catch people out there. If you're going to have a stationary area, make sure you have a secured lockbox or something where your money's just not out in the open for people to steal. A good rule of thumb would be, if you have a lot of items that are in a certain price range, say it's like a lot of items that are in the $5 to $10 price range, you need to maybe consider about $75 to $100 in petty cash, so that if people show up and buy multiple, or if they show up with a big bill, like a 20, and they break it there in just one item, you're not losing all your change. You're going to figure that out as time goes on, kind of what's right for you, and you'll kind of learn what's going to be right for you based on if it's smaller, more regular, or new, or whatever it is. You'll know kind of what you're comfortable with. First market, I would just suggest more. I would absolutely suggest more than what you may believe you need, as long as you can keep it secure. Inevitably, people come up to the spot of, what about credit cards? I don't think for your first vendor experience, unless you already have something set up, I don't think you should go into that. And here's why. You're starting this new experience. You got a lot of things you're going to learn. I would just say that you could always reflect on how your first event goes if you see the need for it, and then maybe change that. But you're going to get in there, and the fewer things you have to worry about maneuvering through your first time, the better you're going to do. Next thing we're going to consider is downtime. I've never been to a market and seen someone not have a little bit of downtime. May only be 5 or 10 minutes, maybe more. But you need to have something that you can do to kind of keep you from dozing off, from losing interest in the day. Me personally, I always have my ukulele, drawing pad, things like that. Some things that if people walk up, I can kind of interact with them. If my wife and I are both at an event, sometimes I'll work on our online stuff, and she'll make sure to interact with any customers we get. But you want to make sure you have something. I've seen people with books, that's great. I would just suggest that you have something besides sitting and scrolling your phone. Most people, when they start scrolling, in my experience, when they sit around and they scroll their phone and that's all they're doing, they just kind of slouch, and they're just zoned out. You don't want a customer to walk by and not be interested in coming to see what you have to offer because they think you're not interested in bringing them in. That could just be my perspective. That's just something I believe. Additionally, let's think about food and water. You want to bring some snacks with you and some kind of drink. I suggest water. If you want to get something else, you go for it. But water holds even if you're there for several hours and it gets to room temp, things like that. You don't want to kill all of your funds on going to buy food from other places. You also don't want to have to leave your booth more than you have to. So having food that you can eat will definitely be a plus. Final section of part 2 is going to be the setup. So I highly recommend that if you have a product that can sit in your vehicle overnight based on the time of year it is, you pack up the night before. If you can't, so in the summertime, we can't put the jewelry in the car because the resin, you can't have it in the heat like that, fluctuating overnight, things like that. It's just not a good setup. But we have it ready to go. We have it by the front door ready to go. You want to reduce as many things as you have to do the day of a show. It's a lot of stress. You don't want to add anything extra. And even when it's time for the show or the event, if the setup window says 9 to 10 and we open at 10:15, you want to be there walking in at 9. You want to, especially for your first couple of events, and I'll talk later on about why I think that's so important, just to consistently do as much as possible, be there closer to the beginning than the end of the setup time. But your first one especially, you want to get set up, and then you want to do something really important when you're done setting up if you have time before you open. And if you watch part 1, you already know what I'm going to say. You want to go talk to other vendors. You want to interact with as many people as you can. Hopefully you have somebody with you. I always encourage to do these events with another person. What if you need to go to the bathroom? What if you just need a break? Something like that. You always want to be able to have someone at your booth. But if you meet other people, we know vendors at our market who they always are by themselves, and sometimes they'll ask us to watch their booth for them. Totally fine. But additionally, talking to vendors, getting a feel for what the community is going to be like, what the event itself is going to be like, hearing their experiences. You might hear from them about other places you can do events or what to expect from your market manager, things like that. This is one of the most, I feel like this is one of the most unused resources that I hear about and see when people are going to these vendor events. They're very isolated. They get kind of wrapped up in their own world. Do the lives. Do all that stuff. That's fine. Be proud of what you've got. Take the pictures. I get it. But at some point, go talk to your fellow vendors. Say hi. Introduce yourself. I've made some seriously amazing friendships and connections just by going and talking to other vendors. And then as soon as you open, every customer that comes over to your area, you need to talk to them. Communication in this, especially in this starting kind of area that we're at, communication is going to be one of the most important pieces of your business.